कंट्रोल करना पड़ेगा मुझे.
I don't know what Neha is going to be controlling, but at least it will not be smaller episodes of our podcast, Sacred. I'm Hindol Sengupta. My friend Neha Bhatnagar is trying to control our content and how much we know about every character we talk about. But actually, this is such a universe. We don't know what we're going to control. The more we read, the
That's
more
right.
we find out.
That's right, Hindol. And today's the saint that we have chosen, it's unbelievable, Hindol. Like, I do not think, I mean, I thought you were erudite with the amount of stuff that you've done, written, but trust me, this Bengali takes the cake. Like, and eats it, and how, or I should say, take the rasgulla dabba and eats it and how.
Prabhat Ranjan Sarkar, many of you know about Prabhat Ranjan Sarkar. Actually, most people would not know about Prabhat Ranjan
That's
Sarkar,
right.
apart from maybe the name of the organization he founded, Ananda Marga.
That's right. I mean, I was surprised that such little is known about him in the public. Uh, but then when I started reading on him and I read the books compiled by his disciples and the people who knew him, I learned that there was a reason people don't know. And one of the biggest reasons was when he was asked to write his autobiography, he wrote one line and said, I was a mystery, I am a mystery, and I shall remain a mystery. And then, when asked to expand further, he said, well, if you want to get to know me, then get to know yourself first. Get to know the work, the ideology. My life is my mission. And so kept strictly away from the public discourses, from media channels. Also, as we learn later, was made infamous by the emergency and Indira Gandhi, and before that, her father, Jawaharlal Nehru, who, in the words of Jawaharlal Nehru's chief of intelligence, B.N. Malik, said that Nehruji had asked us to keep a strict eye on three particular organizations. One was the RSS, one was the Muslim League, and the third was a man called PR Sarkar.
Prabhat Ranjan Sarkar, of course, is, as PR Sarkar's full name went, was really a Bengali man who created a spiritual organization, an organization called Ananda Marga or Marg, which really spoke about the elevation of human beings to a higher plane of consciousness. He taught this idea that people had to get to know their innermost truth, their true selves, in order to elevate them to a higher level of consciousness. And the way to change the world was really to change human beings. And human beings would only change if they discovered the transcendental within themselves. PR Sarkar also wrote 250 books. He was, at one point accused of creating an organization, and Neha was talking a little bit about that organization that not only spoke about spirituality but also perhaps about armed rebellion. There is this whole point in 1971 when PR Sarkar is arrested allegedly for the murder of a bunch of his disciples. Later on, all these charges turn out to be false, but there is this entire thing about his organization and its true motives that always remain a bit shrouded in mystery.
And I think the reason we've selected PR Sarkar today to share his life, though of course half an hour is too short a span to discuss such a prolific thinker, writer, revolutionary, social reformer, philosopher, tantric teacher, guru, poet, linguist, astrologer, palmist, you name it, and he was an expert, almost not possible by human standards. So, for example, Hindol, I think he helped set up one of the largest botanical garden networks, the largest plant species of 50,000 species in the world. He wrote books on Ayurveda, yoga, We established this concept called microvita, which was a new theory on explaining subtle systems like homeopathy. Like you spoke about Ananda Marga, which is in 130 countries today. There are thousands of schools following his educational curriculum. Started this new economic policy called PROUT, then started this sort of new humanism or called neo-humanism, which was another school of thought. He was also erudite linguist. I don't even know how many hundreds of languages he knew. I mean, even that's even possible. That many scripts as well. He added like 18,000 words to the Bengali language, and also I think made the first Bengali encyclopedia. I mean, there is just so much global disaster relief organizations, community organizations, and yet there's no formal sort of interviews of his, or any sort of like public recording, so to speak, except for the ones that he gave to his disciples. But even for the longest time, none of his disciples knew each other. He would not allow them to disclose who he was. And even in Calcutta, Hindol, when he would be writing as a college student, he would be submitting a lot of articles against dogma and, rituals which he felt were not helping society. He would write under different pen names. So he just refused to sort of take any credit, is what at least comes across. And yet, as you said, there was all of these charges against him, shrouded in mystery, not liked by the government of the day then, and we're selected to discuss him because of this one fact that he's lesser known, but also the other fact that he comes back to the basis of a lot of Indian spirituality, which basically says that a heart which is devoid of God worship is a heart as barren as a desert. And the universal representation of God is best represented in a kirtan purified mind or a kirtan purified heart. So, being such an erudite and prolific academic and so on and so forth, he came down to the very basis of spirituality, which was, spiritualizing your life, uplifting your character by following a dharmic life.
सबसे अच्छा तो है कि उन्हीं का कीर्तन किया जाए, फिर कीर्तन करने से उन्हीं का भाव, उन्हीं की भावना मन में रह जाएगी। और मन में उन्हीं की भावना रहने से होगा क्या, मनुष्य की सारी सत्ता सर्वत्र उनके निकट नजदीक पहुंच जाएगी। अब इससे बड़ा कल्याण जीवों का और क्या हो सकता है।
Prabhat Ranjan Sarkar followed a particular tantric methodology of spiritual upliftment, which also was replete with music, with poetry, with a particular kind of kirtan and dance. And he was really active as a spiritual leader for only 17 odd years. But during that time, he managed to create almost a global imprint, taking two big world tours around the world, especially in the West, promoting the idea of Ananda Marga. Ananda Marg is, it quite literally means the path of happiness, and a path which would elevate human beings to a higher plane of consciousness so that they will be able to lead a better, more unique life. Remember, this organization also got connected in the mid 90s to a very famous, or should I say infamous case of arms drop in a place called Purulia, where the Ananda Marg was very active, is still very active, where a man called Kim Davies, his real name was Neil Hawks, actually was arrested later. My apologies, was arrested later for dropping arms from an aircraft into the region. And later he said that Niels Hawk said that he was really doing it to help Ananda Marg protect themselves from communists. Later on, they said that the communist government at that time in West Bengal needed to be overthrown because it had become very authoritarian, and the central government in India, the Congress and others, had connived in a sense to get these arms dropped there. to fight against the communists. There were all kinds of, stories coming out. And even till today, we don't really know what is the real story of the Purulia Arms Drop case, but it was certainly connected in some form or the other to Ananda Marga. And, Prabhat Ranjan Sarkar, always this dramatic figure, again shrouded in mystery. By the way, this arms drop case happened after Prabhat Ranjan Sarkar's death. He died in 1990. He was born, of course, in 1921 in a place called Jamalpur, and he died in Calcutta in 1990. He was only 69 years old, but he had managed to create a movement around the world, writing, as I said, more than 250 books, countless lectures, many of his lectures put together in books, to really try and explain that there was a different world possible.
That's right. And Jamalpur is interesting because it still is India's largest railway workshop. And that's where he worked, and his father worked as an accountant. And his father, it was a very pious family. So there were a lot of ancestors who were saints who had renounced grihastha ashram, or the householder life. So when he was due to be born, his father had a vision that this man will also be, his son will also be known as a saint and will denounce a lot of the comforts of kingly life. And the horoscope that he'd got made, he didn't want that history to be repeated, so he'd kind of burned the horoscope, the story goes. But history shows that, what was foretold came true. And from childhood, he displayed a profound wisdom way beyond its years, clearly an old soul, if you would say in normal parlance. But in Hindu thought, we know there are lifetimes and samskaras have ripened. And he was almost all-knowing since he was a child. And so, being a Bengali Hindol, he didn't eat fish even as a child. He just couldn't get to, allowing any sort of animal trouble against animals. He was extremely sensitive towards any sort of caste differences. He meditated as a child for long hours. He would stare out into space, foretelling the future of this universe. In fact, even as a child, he saw what Ananda Marga would be 25 years later. There was this fun story of, on his evening walks and meditation at the Jamalpur hills, when his friends followed from school. And one of them actually saw him riding a tiger. And of course, that kid got really excited and also fearful and confronted him. And in his classic way of denying anything sort of great or any sort of, siddhi to be known, he said, "No, go and tell the story to others. Let's see if they believe you." Of course, the friend went and told others and no one believed him. And yet, there were these endless stories recounted by his friends from childhood and the people around him about the amazing, clairvoyance that he had about everything that was to happen, that went on in their minds. The meditation for hours, the mantras he would receive through Lord Shiva in his dreams, and so on and so forth. So, of course, there was this small town in Bihar in India, Jamalpur, in which this little boy was born who was already sort of self-realized. There was a key moment, though, of course, of self-realization in the Jamalpur hills, the story goes, where a voice whispered to him and said, "Follow me," and then kind of scolded him and said, "Are you mad? What is with it? Let me show you what Maya really is. Let me show you your past lives." And it seems like that is the day he really became, the master that he was to be in the future as well. And this mystery around him never stops, Hindol, you're right, because it seems that he is the one actually who initiated Subhash Chandra Bose into Tantric meditation, again in the Jamalpur hills in 1940, when Bose and M. N. Roy visited him, who he had met in Calcutta during his college years. And Bose was also said to be a distant cousin of his. And so they had visited him, and there was this argument happening that day about, what is right, what is more urgent for India right now? Is it political freedom or economic freedom? And he was trying to explain how it's so important to have the moral grounding right. The spirituality needs to be very strong within anyone before we can even say that, it'll be a dharmic or a just life and so on. And that's the evening he initiated them into this meditation. And just, I think, a few weeks later, or was it a few months later, they're not sure, but Bose got arrested in July, is what we know, of 1940. And in jail, he really practiced this meditation, which was to influence a lot of his decisions and the direction India's independence would take in the future. And again, this was told in passing at some point to some devotee. And, there was this other incident, Hindol, which was very interesting. And again, not sure if this is true or not, but about the death of Joseph Stalin and how, if you Google, it does say it was shrouded in mystery, so to speak, and the Kremlin announced it only a few days later after he was actually dead. And at that same time, PR Sarkar was demonstrating through a particular form of meditation through another person's body, what was happening at the Kremlin at that point. And it does go, the story goes that Stalin was planning to invade India and PR Sarkar did not want that to happen. And who knows what really happened, but it's interesting that he was telling what was happening at that point in the Kremlin. And he also told the technique by which maybe Stalin would have died. It's called the cosmic scissor, and it's a technique from the Mandukya Upanishads. When if there is injustice being spread, then God can intervene in a mysterious way and, cut off the supply like a scissor to someone's life. And so lots of stuff like this makes us, makes us be attracted towards PR Sarkar, but also be a bit fearful and wonder what this man is all about.
Incredible, absolutely incredible life of PR Sarkar, Prabhat Ranjan Sarkar, a man who was not only interested in a sense, bringing together, Vedantic thought and Tantric thought together to create a combination that would allow human beings to rise to a higher level of consciousness, but also it really dabbled in parts of Indian spirituality and spiritual practices that most other people perhaps never did, especially in the modern era. Also, he was very interested in economics and, in a sense, wrote in detail about a new theory which he called PROUT, Progressive Utilization Theory, which really was an amalgam of capitalism and communism and wanted to go beyond both of those two isms to create a third sort of system which would allow human beings to profit the best from any economic activity. Now, this system is quite interesting because it talks about how the natural resources should be all under collective ownership, so to speak, and yet within it, individuals can apply their own entrepreneurial ability and get certain benefits if they, outperform others. But broadly, this is a system where more and more collective ownership and collective benefit could be spread among people to bring about a more harmonious society, though it absolutely moves away from any of the authoritarian tendencies that communism and socialism usually land up getting enmeshed and mired in. So, a whole new theory called PROUT, Progressive Utilization Theory, that Prabhat Ranjan Sarkar brought about. He also spoke about how, in this economic theory, at the baseline, everybody would get enough to really have a harmonious and fulfilling life. All the basic needs of people would have to be taken care of before any further development of economic activity happens. Because unless the basic needs, food, clothing, shelter, basic education, basic healthcare is met, human beings cannot evolve and look for higher consciousness or higher truth. So he really pushed, PROUT to, as a third way beyond capitalism and communism to really take care of the needs of human beings. Also, PR Ranjan Sarkar was, of course, devoted to his motherland, to India, but he also saw the limitations of mindless nationalism, that it only creates more and more division within the world order, and it in a sense, closes people's minds to other cultures, other ideas, and he suggested that people should keep an open mind and look at the world in its totality, because at the end of the day, if human beings evolve their consciousness, they would be able to see beyond all sort of natural boundaries towards a global consciousness.
That's right. And I think he called the leadership, the terminology was Sadvipras, which basically means leaders who've attained a high level of ethical, mental, spiritual perfection. So they have four predominant mentalities amongst them, which is the working class, warrior class, intellectual class, as well as the capital class, capitalistic class. And the very ancient quote from the Rig Veda, he called the chorus of the Shadvipras, which basically goes as this: let us move together, let us sing together, let us come to know our minds together, let us share like sages of the past, so that all people together may enjoy the universe, unite our intentions, let our hearts be inseparable, let our minds be as one mind, to truly know one another and become one. And this quote from the Rig Vedas kind of symbolizes, Hindol, what you were saying about this universal nationalism, this world government that he wanted created. This path of bliss, where the context from which he was coming at that time, the independent India, which was struggling to remove poverty, where, as he would say, that we have traded white exploiters for brown exploiters. There's so much corruption, capitalism endemic in our government and our bureaucracy, that there is a need for psychic and spiritual fulfillment of our leadership, and then these are paths that he outlined. There was this booklet that he had published, the first of it, which was going to be the Ananda Marga, the PROUT, all of these, this global movement that he created. And that booklet was called Problem of the Day, and it was given in the house of his devotee. In fact, the dedication, Hindol, to that booklet, he wrote that, this is dedicated to Subhash Chandra Bose, who I loved and who I continue to love, in a way hinting to his disciples that maybe Bose was still alive. But that's not the point. The point was, he did agree with a lot of the ways Bose thought about, standing up when needed for India, and then also having this spiritual bent of mind and so on. And in that, he outlined a lot of what was to follow of a lot of these thoughts, and a path against capitalism as we know it, and more towards yamas and niyamas as the foundation of every person's life, which is basically the first two steps of Ashtanga Yoga, which builds character. As a lot of spiritual masters say, you may lose your house, you may lose your relationships, but if you lose character, that is probably the worst thing that can happen. And Sarkar also kind of believed in that and made it mandatory for his disciples to practice yama and niyama as the foundations before even practicing meditation, mindfulness, etc.
What you've been explaining, Neha, of course, also feeds into Prabhat Ranjan Sarkar's great concept of neo-humanism. He spoke about this theory that he came up with called neo-humanism. And he argued that human beings only tend to look at their lives in a human-centric way, so to speak, but actually they should be elevated to what he called universalism. And Sarkar's great quote, where the underlying spirit of humanism is extended to everything, animate and inanimate in the universe. I've designated this as neo-humanism. Neo-humanism will elevate humanism to universalism, the cult of love for all created beings of this universe. Really talking about how human beings, from only thinking about themselves and or only thinking about other human beings, and how human beings can control and exploit the world's natural resources, really to think about almost in a, and this is again, we go back to Vedantic principles here, in a sense, see the living, see that our ties, the ties of our soul, of the Atma, to every other living thing, and to understand that we are all together in this universal consciousness, and anything living has a touch, has a piece of that consciousness, and we are all therefore integrated as one whole. And Sarkar wanted people to elevate to that level of consciousness. Of course, most people were not at that level of consciousness, but it was Sarkar's desire that people elevate themselves to that level of consciousness. And therefore, he talked about new humanism as the answer. Sarkar also in a long tradition of such Bengali mystical figures. We have spoken in the past of Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda, Rishi Aurobindo, of course, and Keshav Chandra Sen, and lots of these other figures. Prabhat Ranjan Sarkar, in a sense, part of that long tradition from the Bengal Renaissance onwards of Bengalis really connected to a deeper search of meaning in the world, and also able to build organizations around the world. Srila Prabhupada also, I think, was part of this long tradition. Build organizations around the world, teaching new forms of encountering consciousness, but of course, all of it very deeply connected to India's ancient wisdom, whether it's Vedanta, whether it's Tantra, and other forms.
Yeah, and he summed it up by saying that, just as my life is important to me, others' lives are equally important to them. And if we don't give value to the lives of all creatures, the development of entire humanity is impossible. So every time, we wanted to get regional, or as he would call it, the biggest factor for imbalance in the world is this focus on geosentiment, which is my territory versus your territory, and that has caused so many issues in the world because we're not devoted as a humanity to that, tender inner world of ours, right? Which is spiritual, which is godlike, because we are the children of, as he would call it, Parama Purusha and Parama Prakriti, the eternal father and the eternal mother, and we've lost that, and so we've become so provincial, regional, casteist, so on and so forth. All of these dogmas. And Hindol, it reminds me of this one quote that Albert Einstein, I think, had said after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where he had said, if I had known what would have happened, with what I did, I would have probably preferred to be a shoemaker, and that's exactly what Prabhat Ranjan Sarkar talks about, to overcome this sort of regret that we could have.
It's an incredible story. I was talking about the Purulia Arms Drop case a little while ago, but there is a context why this arms drop even happened and why it got connected to Ananda Marga. In the 70s, Prabhat Ranjan Sarkar was arrested, again, as I was saying, allegedly accused of the murder of some of his disciples. In the prison, he of course claimed from day one that he was absolutely innocent. In the prison, he was poisoned, and it is said that the local government was trying to kill him, the communist government was trying to kill him, and a jailer had poisoned him. But because of the power of his spiritual practice, the poison couldn't hurt him, and he began a long fast that went on for more than 4 years to demand his release, and demanding that people understand and see that there was no evidence against him and he was completely innocent. In fact, after his fast ended, he was set free because there was no evidence against him, nothing could be proved against him, and his fast had worked. There was no choice but for the authorities to set him free, and Prabhat Ranjan Sarkar was set free by the end of the 1970s, and you can see why all of this adds up to this idea that there was people in Bengal, especially the communist government and others, were trying to eliminate him and the popularity of his movement, which was becoming very, very popular. Please remember, in 1982, when Prabhat Ranjan Sarkar was still alive, 16 sadhus and a sadhvi of the Ananda Marga movement were killed and burnt alive. And till today, we don't know who did it. But of course, it's an open secret that the administration of that time, or goons and assailants connected to the powers that be of that time, were trying to eliminate Sarkar and his movement. And even though so many people were murdered, no justice was ever done to this case. And therefore, I think by the time the 80s were coming to an end, there was a real sense that the Ananda Marga movement needed assistance to fight back against this life-threatening attacks that were happening against them. And therefore, when Kim Davy or Niels Hawk dropped this large cache of weapons, which included several hundred AK-47 rifles and more than 16,000 rounds of ammunition from a Latvian aircraft. Of course, remember, by then Ananda Marga had spread across Europe and in other parts of the Western world. There was a real sense that this could have been protection Ananda Marga was getting to fight against people who were trying to eliminate them and kill Sarkar.
Incredible, because in jail, when you said that he almost fasted for 4+ years, it's true, he was only probably living on 2 cups of whey water a day. And one of the jailers remarks that even Napoleon was tamed by jail, but this living tiger was not able to be tamed. And that's really attributed to, like you said, a lot of the spiritual practices that he followed, including the highest levels of tantric meditation. And this is Vidya Tantra, mind you, not Avidya Tantra, which is the Avidya Tantra is what people fear, and that's why Tantra has a bad name in our country, because Avidya Tantrics are ego driven. They are doing all of the practices to develop spiritual powers, but also occult powers, to be able to hurt or harm others through black magic and so on. But he was a Vidya Tantric, and he told his disciples all the time that never ever, in fact, I will not even let your occult powers be developed, and even if they are, they will only be used for the service of humanity, for the upliftment of others. So never misuse it. And so PR Sarkar, when he was released from jail, gave a speech which I was reading, in which he says that, in the path of dharma or right action, things will happen, which is why this whole jailing incident happened. But at the end, dharma always prevails. And he gave an analogy and said, just as if you want to go to Jammu, you'll sit on the Jammu Express and it'll take you to Jammu. Same way, in the path of life, just sit on the path of dharma and it will always lead you to victory. And victory, Hindol, as you and I know it, may not be necessarily in this lifetime, because a lot of us always say, oh, but good people suffer. And you can see like ill-behaved leaders or ill-behaved people do very well. But it's not limited to this lifetime as we know it. It will be in lifetimes to come, if not in this lifetime. And so I think the one thing that I definitely take, Hindol, from PR Sarkar is this whole practice of a dharmic life based on a grounding of character building, spiritualizing, and God worship. And then automatically the other things will flower so well in our lives, our pursuit of academia or any other profession that we're in.
It's quite an incredible life. Prabhat Ranjan Sarkar, one of the least known today, but one of the most influential figures in the 70s, 80s in India, especially in Eastern India, with the footprint, even today, around the world of Ananda Marga. He also wrote a whole bunch of beautiful music and songs for his movement, which continue to captivate people and his disciples around the world even today.
Actually, the largest number of songs he's composed in before his time, no one had done that many, Hindol. So yes, another dimension of his achievements. He said very beautifully that, my Lord exists and my search for his glimmer and grandeur is never ending. I'm moving along a never ending path, and this search for the great by the little is called mysticism. And how can then one be arrogant? Is a mouse ever arrogant in front of a mountain? No. So even despite all these prolific achievements and the way the organization is impacting us globally, I think PR Sarkar continued to remain humble and taught us all a way to be, despite all achievements, especially today, Hindol, in the day of influencing and social media. It's a tough one.
Amazing story. More than 5,000 songs, as Nehha was saying, written by this one man. These songs are now put together in something called the Prabhat Samhita. The Prabhat Samhita is really followed by his disciples, not just in India, but around the world, as really songs of a new dawn, as Prabhat Ranjan Sarkar, their guru, had promised them. Again, one of those incredible spiritual masters of India with an amazing story that we in this podcast, in the Secret Podcast, are absolutely fascinated by. And that's why it was great fun and very interesting for us to bring this story and this conversation to you.
Yes, and if anyone is interested in reading small, tiny encounters, instances from his life, there's a book on YouTube called The Jamalpur Diaries, and it has 33 chapters, probably an hour each. A long book compiled by his devotees and people close to him, which gives us a glimpse into his life. Relevant links to Prabhat Sarkar's life are attached in the descriptions below. Hindol, thanks so much for this conversation. Would love to hear from all of you, our listeners, on what you thought about this particular podcast and this spiritual giant.
Incredible story, but this is just the beginning. We're only beginning this exploration in this podcast, the Sacred Podcast, on these lives of incredible people and the absolutely infinite treasure trove of the sacred in India. I hope all of you will be with us in weeks and months to come as we bring you more and more of these incredible stories. I'm Hindol Sengupta, with me my very old friend and fellow traveler in this sacred journey, Nehha Bhatnagar. Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste.